troll.
Is it okay if I give
Can I actually be heard or not?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So did you guys watch the video?
Yeah, we hear you.
No.
No,
we're
just laughing at John.
Okay. I think you should watch the video because it's very clear that J Mike doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Okay, what's the video?
Wait, the position here is that J Mike is saying Craig is using induction to validate premise 1. Is that what's going on?
No. J Mike claimed that premise 1 of the Kalam is guilty of the composition fallacy.
What?
How so? Do you know what a compositional fallacy
Either way,
is?
I really don't care.
No, he doesn't.
If, like, J
He
Mike
doesn't
got
know what
something wrong.
Well, that's what I mean.
induction
So
is
it's
either.
something like I don't know. Let me think. The orchestra type thing. I don't know. The orchestra must be good because the musicians are. That's a compositional fallacy.
Anyway, the funny part here is that Matt and John were.
So no one knows what.
Bro, could you stop talking?
Can you get rid of this modalism?
Yeah,
this guy is like honestly not doing anything.
Yeah, you're presupposing.
Yeah, he's got serious issues.
Yeah, Jake. So do you disagree with the claim that the Kalam commits the composition fallacy?
No, it's not the claim. The claim is that premise 1 commits the composition fallacy. That's what his claim is.
Right. Well, I think that sounds right. Why would that be wrong?
Because nobody is arguing or reasoning from part to whole when arguing for premise 1.
No, whole to part is what Sean's saying.
Part to whole or whole to part. The point is, I've heard this criticism.
It's applying a part of the universe.
You've heard the criticism, but I'm simply saying it's not a composition fallacy because you're not reasoning from part to whole.
Everything that begins to exist. What's the first premise again?
Everything that begins to exist.
I think you guys should just play the video. It's like
everything. It's the Kalam.
5 minutes long.
Begins to
why play the video? I mean, we can, but I just want to talk to you about
because if you don't understand the context,
modality. Why can't you control yourself, man?
Because
he can't. He's a spaz. I think you should guys get rid of this guy.
Get him. Do I have mods? I don't even know. Can someone remove this guy? Because he is completely obstructing the conversation.
Everything that begins to exist. Well, it's not even just the first premise. It's I have to go find the damn.
So it's everything that begins to exist has a cause. Is that the first premise?
Yeah, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause.
Right.
That seems to clearly commit the composition fallacy.
Yeah. How so?
Because it's saying, it's the first one part is an inductive inference. It's saying everything that we observe that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. So that's taking a particular instance of
who's reasoning by induction, and even if you were to use it or take it as some type of inductive, no, not necessarily. So even if you took it or
everything that
argued for
begins to exist as a cause, that's purely based on observation.
No, not necessarily. Even if you took it as an inductive, well, let me finish, dude. Even if you took it as an inductive inference, as what you're claiming, that's just based on induction. That's not a composition fallacy.
Well, yeah, but a composition fallacy would be based on induction. We're not saying it's a composition fallacy because it's based on
I don't know what you're going
inference. The rest of the argument,
I know. That's why.
Is where
what I'm saying.
Composition fallacy.
You guys, Jack, are you here?
Well, tell me why it's wrong.
I just want to see if Jack is here.
Okay, I don't. If you think it's so obvious, you can't explain to me why.
What's the question?
Do you believe that the first premise of the Kalam argument, whatever begins to exist has a cause, is necessarily guilty of the composition fallacy?
It's not just the first premise. It's the first premise in conjunction with the second and the third.
Well, there's only two premises.
Well, for the basic,
but no, I don't.
The whole argument in its initial form.
I don't think it has to be a composition fallacy. That objection was made, and I think, as I recall, Craig addressed it. I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but I don't think it has to be a composition fallacy.
Yeah, you're not, Jack, you're not reasoning from part to whole, even if you're taking it as some type of inductive inference. You're not reasoning from part to whole.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I put.
What do you mean?
I put the timestamp. I put the timestamp of.
Are you saying in one sense it is committing the composition fallacy, and in another it isn't?
I think the issue came up, and I think Craig actually reformulated the argument to address it.
I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right, Jack.
Right. Then in its initial form, it could be guilty.
Yeah, can I say something?
You'd have to. Hold on a second. You'd have to show the evidence for that, Jack, because I don't think that's right.
Well, why do you not think it's a composition fallacy, Jake?
Because it's not. If you know what a composition fallacy is, yeah. If you know what a composition fallacy actually is, then you would know that the way that the first premise is formulated and the support that is given for it and the considerations given for it is not based on any reasoning from part to whole.
Well, it seems like it is.
The first premise is talking about everything that it begins with, this has a cause. What's the support for it then? Is it not?
Sorry, ask that again.
You said
right. That's a good question, Haiti.
You said the first premise that everything that begins to exist has a cause. You're saying there's support made for that premise, right?
Yeah, there's arguments given. I mean, if you want
that argument, how else
argument.
are you going to support that argument? But without some induction.
I just don't know how you would support it.
I guess. Do you know the difference between?
You're just going to point. And this is what they do all the time.
You know the difference between induction and composition fallacy?
No.
Every human being has a mother.
I'm asking
That's what they
how
say.
they support the first premise. You said there was support for it. I'm asking how.
And I'm explaining it to you.
No, you're not.
If you look
you're
at,
asking me a question.
if you look at, because you don't know the difference between induction and composition fallacy, which is the point. No, this is the whole point. The support given for the first premise by somebody like Craig is normally he's going to take it as some type of metaphysical a priori principle. That's one way he's going to explain it. The second thing is he's going to talk about what's called basically the chaos principle, that if something can come from nothing. Let me finish, sir. Let me
special pleading in virtue of metaphysical preference?
Let me finish.
That's what you said? Special
so you guys don't want to hear me talk. Okay.
I don't want to hear you special plead. No.
I'll be quiet because I'm not going to be asked to explain something and then be over talked by a bunch of people who don't know what they're speaking about.
I don't want to hear you sit here and give a fallacy as a response, right?
Yeah. I just don't know how.
You could do your points one at a time instead of going on 3-4 points.
Or how about we let him make the fallacy and then you can go ahead and dismantle it and tell him how it's fallacious.
You said the support was a priori metaphysical knowledge or something. Yeah. I don't know how it can be a priori.
Yeah, but this is what Craig says. I'm not saying that works or that solves the problem. But this is what Craig says. Maybe the metaphysical principle eventually fails and there are objections to it, but there's a way he can say it in which it wouldn't be straightforward composition fallacy. And that's what he did.
Yeah, think about what he's saying.
Yeah, there are arguments
you have to take the metaphysics, which is insane.
Well, that sounds like question begging.
Yeah, it's insane. I don't buy it eventually.
That sounds like
ultimately, I don't buy it.
Sounds like question begging. If he's saying
ultimately,
if he's saying it's metaphysically the case that everything, including universes, have a cause, and then his conclusion is, and then his second premise is the universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause, but his support for premise one is that universes, have a cause. I don't see how that's not question begging.
It's like saying, please accept my metaphysics so the argument goes through.
Yeah.
Why would anybody do
Yeah.
If you've ever had this argument with people who are like not as technically versed, that's the first thing they'll do is jump to examples of things beginning like every human being has a mother. Where did you come from? Did you come from your mother and father? Where did the universe come from? Like it's clearly the way people are making this inference.
You know, it's amazing how you ask Jake a question. He's in the process of it. You don't want to hear what he has to say. You just want to have an echo chamber. This is common. I mean, am I wrong here?
No, he was probably going to mutter more fallacies, right? I just wanted to call him out on the first one.
And yes, John, you're always wrong. Just know that.
Yeah, and Jake was making 3 or 4 points, stacking them on together. He could have stopped after making one and let that be addressed, right? That would have worked better.
You asked me what the evidence was for the first premise,
support. Yeah,
and I was explaining to you what it was, given what Craig says about it, and I was interrupted. That's what happened.
Okay, fair enough. You're interrupted. The first thing you
said
was
you're
a priori.
Like you're putting this on the table with such a fervor that it seems like
you think
because
it goes through. It's so
why the fuck?
Because
so why the
obvious.
fuck? Why the fuck would I accept?
For no
so
reason.
Why the fuck? So why the
ridiculous.
fuck would I accept? So why the fuck would I accept this fucking metaphysical apology?
Dude, we weren't arguing about whether or not the argument is sound or correct. We were arguing what the claim
Look,
is.
I don't give a fuck that he
premise.
makes some kind of weird fallacious response. You're just saying something trivial,
okay, exactly.
right?
So you're arguing.
So why did you bring it up then? Why did you bring it up then?
You're arguing about something
Why did you bring it up then?
We weren't arguing about the soundness of the argument.
Why
that wasn't
did
the
you?
discussion.
Why did you bring up something that was just like accept my
argument, you idiot?
Why did you bring up accept my metaphysic and the argument goes through? What was the purpose?
You're an idiot, dude.
Yeah, what was the purpose?
To be fair though, Delano, he doesn't need to argue the argument goes through. All he needs to do is Craig has a response saying he's not using the composition fallacy. That's all. We're not saying
what the fuck is the point of just saying Craig has a response?
Well, that's it. We all know the Kalam isn't sound, but it doesn't. Even Jack said it. He has a way to do it in such a way it doesn't straightforwardly do the composition fallacy, and that's all we need to defend. That's all we need.
Am I on fucking drugs to think that Jake was trying to present this like it was some kind of fucking hammer, right?
Yes, you are on drugs.
I've never done drugs, so.
Yeah, I didn't.
You are, because I was not presenting it or trying to argue for the Kalam, you idiot.
Then what was the fucking point of saying that then?
The point was the original discussion was about a video that Matt was talking about with J Mike and him claiming that the first premise is necessarily guilty of the fallacy of composition. And that's laughable in the same way that you guys
and
are
you're
mocking.
Saying Craig
the
gets
same
out of
way
this
that you guys
by
are
imposing
mocking
some
Darth
kind
Dawkins
of weird
for not knowing what the problem of evil is. This is just as laughable.
And you say Craig gets out of this by imposing some kind of weird metaphysical objection.
No, dude, it has nothing to do with that.
You're a fucking joke.
This is what it's all about. This is in response to Darth getting wrecked about being wrong about the problem of evil. Now I get it. Okay, continue.
I think the thing happened in the wrong order as well. The people objecting to the composition fallacy.
About Darth being wrong.
The people,
I don't give a damn about Darth.
Yeah, the people objecting with the composition fallacy, they weren't aware that Craig had already seen that before.
Jacob, you haven't even watched the video. How are you commenting and knowing what the guy was talking about? You didn't even see it.
Right, so
no.
Sounds like Craig changed his justification.
No, he didn't.
He did not change it.
I asked for evidence of that from Jack, and there hasn't been presented any.
Sorry. William Lane Craig changed his evidence for premise one from induction to question bag.
No, he did not. He had this argument before the objection came.
Fallacy, so he stops.
No. It's not when they pointed out it was a composition fallacy. Even from his books from 1979, he already had it as a metaphysics. He thinks ahead. He knows that if he just says straightforward.
Fine. He's just changed the justification premise one, but he's got more problems.
Yeah,
I can fucking twist the gears on metaphysics to justify anything I want. Why would anybody think that's interesting?
Yeah, I don't buy it either. But the thing is, he has a way to say it in such a way that it's not like stupidly, straightforwardly composition fallacy. Not to say it works in the end, but there are many philosophical arguments that play on metaphysical intuitions. His wouldn't be the first. There are many out there, so his is not special. Yes, his justification is shaky because he's thinking that, well, nothing comes from nothing, so he thinks it's a sound principle to say that everything that begins to exist has to have a cause metaphysically, and it's just an intuition, it's a metaphysical principle. I think in the end, probably people would argue against him that it doesn't work, but that's not the same thing to say he's necessarily has to commit a composition fallacy. I think that's not true.
So he says it's a metaphysical intuition that nothing comes from nothing.
Yes, and I don't buy it, but that's how he's going, and that's a little different from composition.
It still seems very closely related.
As long as I've seen Craig argue, yeah, he's always said ex nihilo nihil fit. I mean, this is part of his argument all the time, and so it's not a composition fallacy in my view, anyway.
Yeah, it's metaphysically necessary God doesn't exist. So combat that, John.
I'm just saying he literally prefaces that all the time. And so the idea.
Well, that doesn't even mean that like anyone's a fool for reading that argument and thinking there's a composition division fallacy. Just if they haven't heard the justification of the first premise, they might very rightly.
There is, if they don't know what the difference is between induction and reasoning from part to whole.
Well, reasoning from part to whole is going to involve induction.
Yeah, if you call it induction alone, that's gonna end up with the composition fallacy, I think, because it's gonna be pointing into things inside of the universe. If you listen to what Craig says, he had to actually leave that induction argument alone and
no, he doesn't actually. He actually responds to this ridiculous claim and also mentions induction in the process.
Do you have the video and the timestamp?
I've told you to just watch the video many times, but you guys are averse to it. It's like 5 minutes long.
Where is the video?
Composition fallacy.
Well, I thought Matt presented it. I just came in the room. I thought Matt had already presented.
No. I don't see any video. Is it the J Mike video you're talking about?
Correct.
The arguments have long been accused of committing composition fallacies.
I'll tell you what. I'll put it in the chat. I'll put the link. If the mods want to put it up for people to see, that would be the best thing to do.
I think Sean wanted to say something, but everybody was talking at the same time.
Somebody just whispering at me? What just happened?
Yeah, I just put the video in the chat. You can watch, see what J Mike said, and you can see what William Lane Craig says.
Well, you beat me to the punch, but yeah, I put it in the text. If you want to put it up and pin it up, then people can look at it for themselves.
I don't see it as much different from just classical contingency argument. Like everything that we see that begins to exist has a cause.
Like imagine saying premise 1 goes through if you take premise 1 to go through. What the fuck?
Yeah, too bad nobody's saying that.
Yeah, that's what you're saying, Craig is saying.
Not at all.
Yeah, it's just metaphysically necessary, right?
What does that even mean, metaphysically necessary?
It's a cope.
Whose metaphysics? Whose metaphysics?
Craig's.
Not mine. Right?
John Lee's.
It's It's just his belief.
Which once again points to the stupid fucking point that there was no reason to even say that. I don't know why Jake said this shit.
That's clear. You don't know what I'm saying.
You're fucking retarded.
Okay, I mean, look, I'll do it too. It's metaphysically necessary that universes pop out of nowhere. There you go. I've just justified my premise.
Who's arguing that?
It's my metaphysics, right? So it's metaphysically necessary. Prove me wrong.
Fucking Jake and John running your high fiving over some retard shit. Jesus.
I'm genuinely, I'm out of the loop of a lot of things as far as the Kalam's concerned. J. Mike, Matt Adams, all of this. I'm just
John, did you
honestly,
actually watch the video?
no, I did not. I haven't gotten to
Okay,
it.
then you should shut up until you watch it.
Well, I mean, I'm just responding to what has
Yeah,
been said
just
and
be
things like
quiet,
that.
John. Just watch the video.
John, you do this shit all the time.
This also seems like a bit of a bait and switch, because if you just saw the argument, you would assume premise one was the result of induction. You'd have no reason not to. It seems to be making a claim about the physical world. Everything begins to exist has a cause, right? Why wouldn't you assume that just means from observation? How else would you
Because
just take it?
because Craig in his
Inductive
argument,
I
reasoning is not
literally
part to
said
whole.
that if you didn't know that Craig had some alternative justification, just the average person talking to another average person, they would assume that that was induction.
yeah, I
That's
can
what I
No,
say. That's
respond
even
why
to
it's
if it is
that.
disingenuous.
induction, it's not a composition fallacy. That's
Right,
the
but
point.
I understand that. I'm just saying that to then, well, wait a minute. So even if it's induction, it's not a composition fallacy.
No,
How'd you
it's
get
not.
to that? Well, can you explain that?
Do you
Yeah,
know
you
what a
didn't claim that.
composition fallacy is?
Yes, I do. And I'm not going to say it to you because I'm not playing your like quiz show game. Assume I know what it is and continue. So
Well, if you knew what it is, you wouldn't ask.
I literally just said one
What the
seems to
fuck just
be.
happened? What was that?
Look, this is what I said. Listen to what I said. I said nothing about fallacies at all. I said the average person reading premise one would assume that is induction. That's what I said.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Great. Okay. So the composition fallacy would be assuming that what's true of the parts is true of the whole.
Correct, but in this case, you're not
So,
arguing from part to whole.
well, you may not explicitly be arguing from parts from whole, but what you're saying is from induction, as is from what I observe, and you can only observe what's going on in this universe. We don't have a way of observing what goes on outside universes. You are concluding that everything begins to exist, has a beginning, and
That's
you
just what
only know
induction is.
you only know that because of what you observe in the parts, as in inside the universe, not the whole
Yeah, that's just what
universe.
induction is, though.
What? Yeah, and
No, no.
what? How is it not a composition fallacy if you're using
It,
induction?
it's kind of
Oh.
like
No, you
uniformitarianism,
haven't
right?
actually
We
explained. Look,
observe
I'm
through
open to be
induction.
wrong, Jake. I'm not that good at this stuff, but you actually haven't explained it's not.
I've tried to explain it several times, but every time I start explaining it, you guys are laughing. I'm being called names, all this kind of stuff. I don't have time to play baby games. This
Right,
is
so you're
very
not going to
basic stuff.
explain it. Well,
No,
This
I'm
is
not
what you
going to
would
explain
call
it to people who are
okay, you're not going to
talking
explain
like
it.
that. No.
Jake is doing what
Okay.
you would call dad bod theology. I think that's what they call it.
I mean, it seems to me that it would only not be a composition fallacy if you had other reasons for saying everything that begins to exist has a cause, right? But if you're just saying from observing what goes on in this universe, I don't see how it's not a composition fallacy. But if no one wants to explain it to me, that's fine. I'll just stay ignorant.
Yeah, and something is, I saw a newer version, maybe it's a different version of Craig responding, where he doesn't mention induction. I think if he mentions induction, he runs into this same problem because he's sampling, right? And he's sampling from things inside of our own universe.
Didn't I just say that, Jacob? Jacob, you have a nasty habit of just rephrasing stuff I said. I don't know if you're where you do it. I literally just said that. Did I not?
Yeah, you could have just said Haiti is correct here. You should have just said Haiti was correct. That's all you should.
Yes, sorry about that. But I was just trying to corroborate you that.
I think you were trying
because I've been trying to.
Yeah. Okay. Just say Haiti's correct.
Yeah, I'll just. Yeah. I can just say that.
Was that what J. Mike was saying, that because Craig reasons that everything that we've encountered has a cause, we can therefore generalize that the universe has a cause? Is that the idea? Because it seems like the inductive form of the inference is all F's. All F's we've seen are G's, therefore all F's are G's, right? So everything inside the universe that we've seen has a cause, therefore the universe itself has a cause. Was that the criticism that he was making, that that's a fallacy of composition?
Yes, there's something like that, something along that line. But what I was saying was that it seems like Craig has dropped this in another video. He didn't mention induction when he was trying to defend it. He just said, well, I'm using the metaphysical principle of nothing can come from nothing and this and that, so that he can pretend at least that he's thinking about other things when he's doing his metaphysical thinking, things that are not in the universe. He's using those in his thinking just to avoid this issue.
But what Jake just said was, even if it was induction, it wouldn't be a composition fallacy, but he did not want to explain why, and that's why I was asking.
He actually tried.
I don't think he can get out of that.
He failed.
I mean, induction, the composition fallacy is going to be something like every brick in the building is, So let me think of a better example.
Yeah, the other guy gave a good one.
Jack, can I explain to you? Hold on a second, John. Shut up, John. You haven't watched the video. Jack, can I explain to you what J. Mike actually said?
Yeah, go ahead.
You listening? Okay. So he said that the first premise is guilty of the composition fallacy right off of the bat, simply because you are claiming that everything that begins to exist has a cause based on your 0.000005 experience with things. That was his claim. You have a limited experience, so you can't universalize this premise. Was basically his claim.
Yeah, well, that doesn't seem right.
Correct. That's not right. That's just what induction is. And to say that that is a composition fallacy is to confuse what induction is from reasoning from part to whole and explaining it that way. It's just ridiculous.
So it was more like a black swan fallacy. That's what he should have said, right?
Jack, do you understand the point now?
Yeah, but it seems like what you could say, well, I guess how Craig defends the first premise seems like there could be an issue of fallacy of composition there, depending on how he defends it.
Yeah, all he's saying is that J. Mike did like a poor job of rendering the objection, or he like misunderstood how it's supposed to be applied. That doesn't mean that it can't be applied. Who cares about that?
No, we're saying that he doesn't know what an induction is.
Well,
because it's pretty bad.
All right, we can agree that he fucked up. Yeah, that's all just.
Well, I think that's the only point Matt was making.
The Kalam.
Sure, how?
Yeah.
Yes, because I watched the video and J Mike didn't even wait for the other guy to try to defend it. He just assumed that it can only be defended in one way and started attacking it that way. And that's what many people did to Craig. I'm not saying
No,
Craig's
but it's not
arguments
the
work,
point.
but yeah,
That's not the point. The point is his reasoning for why is an
yeah.
explanation of just what induction is. That's the point.
Oh yeah, that's induction rather. Yeah, it's true because Craig wouldn't say, "Well, I looked at the things inside of the universe and the parts of it, they have a cause. Therefore, the whole has to have a." He didn't phrase it that way
J.
directly,
Mike was
but we're
just
trying to.
saying you can't
Yeah,
take this premise as universal because you've had limited experiences. So how do you know? That's
yeah,
basically what
yeah,
his idea was, which is
yeah.
just
Okay, how?
saying, well, you have a problem with induction then.
Yeah, how he's wording it is
Well, what's wrong
faulty
with that?
because
What's wrong
induction
with
is
it?
valid. We
Because
use it every
the
day.
induction undergirds the entire scientific method. So, I mean, you could take an issue with it, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Induction
Yeah.
undergirds the
Many
scientific
people.
method. Why did you say that?
Maybe it does,
Yeah,
right?
but who
But I
cares?
mean,
Why did he say
He's
that?
just saying
doesn't erase the
that it's a
problem.
bullet. He's saying it's a bullet that somebody would probably not want to bite.
Yeah.
Because
But someone can reason that in science, when we're doing induction, we are doing induction over things inside of the universe. We're not like saying that, oh, it might apply outside. Or if we say it might apply outside, it's a bit weak.
Like,
So Craig might be using.
does Jake think that people make the claim that like science like arrives at like deductive truths or something? Like, what the fuck garbage are you saying?
no, the point that
No,
he's
that's not what I'm saying. Jack, can you repeat what you said before? I didn't
Seems
hear
like if
you.
you're not saying that, then
I
you're
was
just
just
saying
saying
something trivial.
no. What he's saying is that if you're objecting to inductive inference altogether, then you have to bite the bullet of giving up on science, right? Which relies on the inductive method, or at least most people think so. So that's like not a bullet you're going to want to bite. Just reject it because it's an inductive inference. That's all that he's saying.
I think the
That's
criticism
correct.
just applies to the argument, which would make it not deductive. Like I don't understand the parody you're trying to run here.
If you're pointing out a fallacy, right, that's going to be a problem for the argument, right? If you're merely saying, well, the argument, one of the premises of the argument is supported by some kind of inductive argument, and I object to inductive inferences, right? So therefore, I don't think that premise is supported. That's going to commit you to like what would for most people be very unpalatable consequence, which is
I would just make the conclusion
Correct.
probabilistic.
yeah, the
But
conclusion is probabilistic, but
it
somebody could
is.
say, well, I don't think induction is a valid method. Or
Yeah, but Craig doesn't want to say the conclusion is probabilistic, right?
No, he does at times.
Yeah, he does. That's the point.
The conclusion of the
Yes, he does.
argument, well, the Kalam argument itself is deductive, right? But the support for the premises can be in some cases probabilistic.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, his phrasing is that
Deductive argument with premises that have inductive support, correct?
Yeah, he says that the premises are more plausible than not. That's how he phrases it.
But Danny, do you recall the stuff about the composition fallacy in the Kalam? I mean, because that's an old issue in cosmological arguments.
As far as Craig,
I seem to recall. I seem to recall Craig addressing it.
He does address it in that video. X number of replies to the Kalam so bad that I can't even make it up. That's
correct.
Right. He addresses it there, but I totally forgot his response, so I have to go back.
Yeah, I just watched it just now. It wasn't substantive. He went to it's a metaphysical principle. Nothing comes from nothing, and it's general. He's not looking at things in the universe and saying that these parts don't have a cause, so the whole doesn't have a cause. So his response wasn't that convincing, but all he did was trying to say he wasn't using composition fallacy. So not to say that the response he gives works, but he was able to respond and say, well, that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah, because he's not trying to support the argument. He's just explaining to you how it's not actually a fallacy.
Yeah. He gave what he uses to support the stuff, and you might not buy it.
Yeah,
But
no.
it
He
wasn't the
gives what
composition fallacy.
he gives what he uses to support the premise to show that none of what he's using to support the premise is guilty of a fallacy of composition.
And I mean, if the idea is that you could still make, like, think about this, like if someone thought that, I don't, Craig doesn't say this, but I'm just thinking to myself, if someone said, well, there's this item that is made of iron atoms, and you know that there's some kind of integrity with respect to iron atoms. And you say, well, if it's made of iron atoms, the item is likely a durable item. I think it's different than saying that, well, given that iron atoms are strong, therefore the item is strong. Because yeah, so I think I think there's a way to not to say that if the parts, given my experience, given that for every thing that's made of iron, in my experience it's usually, or it is, a durable item. You know, I don't think that's going to be fallacious. It's just a loose inductive inference. So even if he was strictly saying something about the part, sorry, what were we gonna? You unmuted, Jake. I wanted to know what your thought about that.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the video Matt was referring to, I want to make clear, I was not arguing for the Kalam. I didn't come here to run the Kalam argument. What I came to do was to support what I think Matt was trying to say, which is that in the video, J Mike simply doesn't understand what induction is because he claims that the argument is guilty of the fallacy of composition, but his explanation for that is just explaining what induction is. That's the only
Yeah,
point that I came to make.
and
Anything
I
else
think you made
besides
it.
that is an entirely different story.
Yeah.
But you guys were averse to that.
Okay. I think you did make it. I think Matt was incapable of making it. So I appreciate you explaining it. But you did also say that if it was inductive, it still wouldn't be a composition fallacy. And I'm so curious to hear about that.
Yeah, but that's the part that we've just been discussing.
Well, we can talk about it
That
another time if you don't want to talk about it. I don't want to go around saying it's a composition fallacy if it's not, right? So I don't want to say dumb things.
I've tried to.
But you're not telling me.
I've
No, in the
tried
last few minutes, that's
to
been done.
explain it, but
No, I didn't
maybe
hear
I'm
it.
not doing.
Oh, I
Okay, well
didn't
maybe I'm
hear it.
not explaining it well. You're breaking up for me.
Yeah, I think all three people said it, and even Danny, like, if it was the composition thing he was going to, it'd be like he'd almost be doing like a deductive thing that the parts have a cause, therefore the whole has a cause. But if you're just saying we're sampling and we're just looking around and seeing that everything we encounter seems to have a cause, then very likely, and then he hedges it a bit. So very likely this other one also has a cause as well. Then it kind of evades this claim of composition fallacy. Seems like that's how it works. Though it might not be convincing because you might say, well, everything you sampled is in the universe, as others have said. I don't think there's any way to talk about this thing without repeating what somebody else has said. So I hope nobody gets offended. But That's it. Like you look around, you see you, so that's it. Yeah.
Jake wants to specifically reply to this J Mike thing, and then there's just the overall question about whether it's a composition fallacy or and I think ultimately just I have to look back on how Craig exactly defends that premise, but I it's kind of an indeterminate for me whether it's a composition fallacy. It's just I lean towards no, but I could be convinced otherwise. Someone would have to explain it.
Yeah, it's no. I only today I watched the videos again, and he was saying induction and a metaphysical principle of nothing comes from nothing. It's intuitive. Yes, you can then fight him on that because people have counter arguments to anybody trying to use their intuition to say that everything that begins to exist has a cause. So he could be defeated on that, but at least if he's saying that it's some kind of metaphysical argument he's making, then he's not like straightforwardly guilty of composition fallacy. He's not thereby saying, well, all the parts of the universe have a cause, so therefore the universe must have a cause. Like that's what he would have to be doing in order to be guilty of a composition fallacy.
Yeah, but there's just going to be a question about whether his defense translates to that, right? Because
oh yes, this is where it gets tricky, right? Because I think I mentioned that as well. One could then say, well, what he's doing, even though he's hedging it and making it like a loose inductive inference, it kind of boils down to he's sampling the things inside of the universe and saying, oh, probably the one outside as well hasn't got a cause and it's weak at best. Even if it's not fallacious, it's a little bit weak, right?
Yeah, Danny, I sent you the video in the back channel where you can see what J Mike said and you can see what Craig says in the actual video that you're referring to.
Hey, Danny, how many times have you been in a conversation with a Muslim or a Christian and they ask you, well, where did you come from?
Okay, thank you.
You have a mother and a father, right? And
yeah, I get a work question. I get something like, if I say that I'm an atheist, if they find out, they ask me, what do you believe in then? And I just don't know what to do with that question. It's so similar. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, but that clearly commits the composition fallacy. They're saying because we have a mother, the human race must have a mother. The universe must have come from something.
Yes, some of Craig's people, I wanted to say minions, but I don't want to be offensive. Some of them go out trying to defend that first premise, and they're not as nuanced, and they might straightforwardly commit the fallacy of composition. All Craig would try to do is to hedge his wording so that at least on the face of it doesn't come out like that.
So can someone, have you guys already talked about what his actual argument is, if it's not just mere induction?
It's metaphysically a priori.
Yeah, something like that. He said, we just look at things like nothing. It looks like nothing can come from nothing and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It should be.
I mean, that just sounds ridiculous, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Is he just appealing to our intuitions or?
Yeah,
well,
intuitions. Yeah.
Wouldn't our intuitions be based off like what we see? Like we have an intuition that nothing comes from nothing because we've never seen it, and we've seen lots of things come from other things. I mean, do you think the baby has this intuition?
Craig is doing what Jake would call dad bod theology, right? He loves that term.
I think it's something like many arguments work that way. Like the PSR, for example, principle of sufficient reason. What is that based on? Is there any detailed argument? It looks like people just sit around and think, this seems like it should be a first principle in metaphysics, and then they start, like saying, "Oh, do you have any?" So it seems like that's what he's trying to do. That it doesn't seem like nothing can come from nothing. Anything can come from nothing, or something like that. Then so it means, he says it seems to him that must be a good principle to follow. And he might actually be doing this just to not be accused of sampling things inside of the universe and concluding. So he tries to go at a higher level.
So can we all agree, though, if we just meet the average theist who uses the Kalam and their justification premise is one is just like, look around you. This is how things work. We'd agree that's a composition fallacy, right? Can we, if they're using induction?
No.
Does anyone else disagree? I just want to see how wrong I am. If everyone
No, I think
agrees with
that's
me,
exactly right.
okay.
I also disagree.
Eileen, no.
Who said
Eileen,
Eileen no? Danny?
Danny, yeah.
Danny, me too.
Okay, Danny, can you explain it to me? I don't really have a dog in that. It's just I always assumed it was a composition fallacy, but I'd like to hear why it's not.
Well,
I don't know what it is about this topic, but people really seem to want to push composition fallacy.
Yeah, so I mean, I can kind of explain it. So with deductive inferences, you're concerned with validity. With inductive inferences, you're concerned with cogency. And one of the things about cogency is that you're going to be concerned with the class of the things that you're citing as your inductive past instances. So if, say, I said something like, all the ants I've ever seen are black, therefore everything is black, right? That's not going to be cogent, right? Because the class for my observations is ants, right? So for something like the inductive defense for the first premise of the Kalam argument, the instances that you're pointing to are parts of the universe. So if you say all temporally finite parts of the universe that I've seen have had a cause, therefore the universe has a cause, as in the whole, you're going to be violating that sort of rule. You could make an inductive inference that says all the temporally finite parts of the universe that I've seen have a cause, therefore all temporally finite parts of the universe have a cause. And that would be a cogent inference. But there is going to be a composition fallacy if you try to say, therefore, the whole has a cause.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that what you're describing is really a straw man of what Craig is arguing? And therefore it can be viewed a different way in attempting to put forth the premise?
Yeah, he might have other justifications that
It's a
aren't
complete
just
straw
inductive.
man.
Well, yeah, like I said, he might have other reasons for believing. He might have other defenses of the premise that aren't an inductive inference, right?
Now, being that it's Craig's argument, isn't he allowed to justify his own premises, not according to what you're saying he must do, but what he's saying that he is doing?
Yeah, I'm going off of the. So what Jake was saying earlier is that there is an inductive defense of the premise. So that's the thing I'm talking about. If there's a different supporting argument for the premise, then you address that separately. But
that actually makes perfect sense.
To me, the way that you're describing it, I don't think Craig is, even in his public debates, I don't see him as describing it that way at all.
Did you not hear what he said? Jake said, even if it's using inductive to support the premise, that's not composition error.
Right.
That's what Sully is trying to talk about.
Right. Then I guess Sully's trying to say that if it is inductive, well, this is how it could be viewed. And so, I agree with Jake in a sense that if you're going to attack that as a composition fallacy, you're really attacking the very principles, the very scientific method, and basically you're arguing against science.
well, no, because I'm not saying that all inductive inferences are bad or something like that.
Just in this particular case, because you're saying that it reasons in a sense of induction to include the whole by examining the parts. I guess that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right, but that's not what Craig is doing at all.
Okay, so how is that not what he's doing?
He did
First
kind of
of all,
explain
did you actually watch the video, which was What was the topic?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him make that. I've seen him make that case before.
Okay, so where does he reason from part to whole in the video?
Well, what I'm saying is that if you're making the inductive argument, and that the prior examples that you're using are all parts, you don't have any wholes, right?
I didn't see the video, but didn't
They're
he
not.
say,
They're
Jake,
not.
that
They're
he
not
said point
parts. What are you
zero
talking
zero
about?
zero zero 0.0005 or whatever of experiences? Wasn't that his reasoning?
Oh, that's J Mike, but that's a different thing. He's talking about something else. Yeah, J Mike wasn't
No,
saying
because
this.
you referenced the video is why.
Yeah, but I'm getting to what Craig's argument or
Oh,
inductive
okay.
argument actually is.
Okay.
And I'm saying that the way that he's characterizing it by talking about reasoning from part to whole, Craig isn't doing that. So therefore, his criticism and what he's saying just doesn't apply.
So does he have any of the or any of his priors on the inductive inference not parts of the universe?
He's not talking about or categorizing that as if, oh, every part of the universe has a cause and therefore the whole universe has a cause. That's why I'm asking, where are you getting this idea from?
Well, no, I mean, presumably the inductive inference is going to be made on the basis of things that you have experience with.
Is all inductive inference part to whole?
No.
Okay, so why are you assuming that in the case of him making this inductive inference that it's part to whole when he's not couching it that way?
Because he doesn't have to call it that for it to be that, right?
Yeah, but you're not showing how it is. In fact, it's taken when he says whatever begins to exist has a cause. There's nothing there about part to whole whatsoever.
Yeah, but that's the thing that's being supported, right? And the point is that the things that are used in the inductive inference as prior examples to support it are all parts of the universe.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I
I'm
must
just
have heard the
a bit
Kalam
busy.
maybe 20 plus times in the debates I've seen William Lane Craig, and I've seen a lot, by the way, but I've never heard him say anything about part, whole, nothing, not even close to that type of concept. And what I do recall a lot of times, he always begins with the ex nihilo nihilo fit or what nihil fit or something, and then he'll say from nothing comes nothing or whatever he'll say that, and then that's how he starts off his argument.
Right, that would not be an inductive argument. So that's a different sort of justification you could give, but
It seems to me that that's exact. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, and so if it's not inductive from what I've been listening to for all these years, at least in his formal debates, he doesn't seem to be referencing inductive. Now he may be, I don't know, but and just from
He
how
uses
I
both.
understand it, he was not.
He uses both, John.
He uses both, okay, but he definitely
Yeah,
would bring in the other.
no, he uses three mainly, which I explained in the other room. What you just mentioned. Then he talks about the idea of, well, if things possibly could come from nothing, then why doesn't anything and everything come from nothing? And he goes on and gives his examples. That's the second point that he makes usually, and the third point he makes is about this sort of inductive inference. So he makes both points.
And then you're saying that when he does talk about the inductive, it's not part of whole.
Yeah, correct.
right. So that's what I'm sort of challenging, right? Is that you don't have anything other than parts to make an inductive inference like that.
Yeah, you're not talking about parts. It's like if you look in the video of what who was it? I think Abdurrahman was making the point originally when he was talking about sheep, right? Well, it has a cause, and then you have another one, and it has a cause. You're not looking at as if that there's going to be this big mega sheep. I think was his wording at the end, in which all of these other things are a part of. That's not the way that the inference is working.
Yeah, but that seems to be a sort of modal scope fallacy where you're going to, and this is something that Craig has said before, where it's if you're going to make an inference from each sheep has a cause to like sheepness has a cause, right? That's a modal scope fallacy in that case.
Hi, thank you.
The point is just that, like, if you're going to make inductive inferences about something like universes as a whole, you don't have any examples of those to make your inductive inference.
Am I hearing you say that in order to make an inductive inference about the universe, there would have to be observations of multiple universes, so to speak? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you'd have to have a class that the universe falls into, right? That also meets the same class as your other examples, right?
Yeah, you do. That's the point. I mean, I wish I could speak more, but I'm kind of stuck at work.
And so maybe you're saying that can't be done because there's only one universe that we know of in that sense?
Well, I mean, at least in defense of what J. Mike was saying, the idea is that all the examples that you have that you're going to appeal to make this inductive inference are parts of the universe. They're not wholes in that sense.
They are wholes in the sense that they're individual things, and that's what's up for dispute. It's not parts of universes and then whole universes. That's not the category or class that is being discussed.
So you just want to say that the class is just things that begin to exist.
Yeah, the word is whatever. That's the phrasing. It's very general.
So I get what Jake is saying. So everything that is discussed inductively, each of them in and of themselves are wholes. Uh, they're not understood as parts of a
It's
universe, in
phrased
other
in a
words.
way to be the most general as possible. It's talking about things in general. If you want to talk about a thingness, it's not speaking about parts of universes and then universes, and we haven't experienced that, so we can't say anything. That's just misunderstanding of what is being said.
Sure. So, like, I mean, what I would say is that although the target class might be all things that begin to exist or something like that, you're still limited in the scope of your inductive inference to only things that are parts of a universe. So you might not be explicitly saying that, but you don't have access to anything else.
Yeah, but we're talking about things in general. The category are things. Category is not universes. Universe is a subset of that class or category. So it's again, it's not going from part of something to then speaking about the whole of something. It's saying that this are what things are, and each thing that you're describing as a part is a thing itself. It's not just merely a part of a thing. It actually is a thing.
So, in other words, a universe is a subset of thing. Would that be correct?
Correct. I mean, I'm just trying to explain the categorization because it's as general as possible. It's saying whatever begins to exist, right? So it's not to be cashed out in terms of this class of universe or parts of universe. There's nothing to do with that. It's a very
Yeah, but
extremely general.
I understand that that's supposed to be the conclusion, but the point is that the things you're offering in support when you make the inductive inference happen to be all parts.
No, they're not. They're all
It'd be
things. They're not all parts. They're all things.
no, but they are parts of the universe. That's the point.
They're all individual things. That's the point.
Yeah, I mean parts are things. So it's not inconsistent with what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you're not again, you're not reasoning from part to whole. You're talking about the category of thing. This is not very difficult to
Well, what
understand.
I'm saying is that you're not being explicit about that the fact that that's what you're doing, but that is what you're doing. So
No,
let's say
it's not.
let's say I've never seen a house, right? And all I've seen are bricks. And I say, well, bricks don't have rooms in them. None of these bricks have rooms in them. Therefore, houses don't have rooms in them, right? That's going to be a composition fallacy. Now, it could be that the bricks are the only things that I have any experience with, right? And I could just say, well, no, I'm just talking about things, but I'm just ignoring the fact that I'm talking about parts.
Okay, Sully, can you hear me? Because you sound like you're breaking up. I don't know if it's on my end.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, can you show me an instance of the criticism, particularly against Craig's inductive inference in published academic works that have been peer reviewed that are making the claim that it's guilty of a composition fallacy?
I mean, I'm not really aware of any.
Why would you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there aren't any.
Because he's not guilty of it?
Okay, so maybe here's what I'm suggesting. Maybe you should research it, not to say that you haven't. Research it more, and if there hasn't been a paper published on it, maybe you should consider writing one and submit it for review.
Okay. I mean, just the fact that there hasn't been a paper published about something doesn't really, that's an argument.
No, I'm just saying to you, if you really think it's a good idea, then that's something that you should do.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it more at some point. I don't have much time left, but I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to be antagonistic either.
I have a question, Jake. Are there any philosophers that actually do claim that it's a composition fallacy?
I have never seen that with this particular argument and the first premise. What I have seen, and I think what is part of the confusion, for example, with like J. Mike mentioned in the video, he mentioned Russell or Bertrand Russell. From what I understand, is that Bertrand Russell's criticism in that respect was with the contingency argument, and not necessarily specifically talking about Craig's inductive inference here. Now, I don't mean anachronistically. Obviously, he wasn't around to critique Craig's argument in that way, but they're two different points. I think J. Mike was just somewhat confused about that. So no, I'm not aware of any, and that's why I asked Sully, because I haven't read every single paper on it, so I could have missed something, and I thought maybe he was aware of it. That's why I asked.
No, I mean, I'm not aware of one either. I mean, for all I know, there could be one, but I don't know that anything really hinges on whether or not somebody's written a paper.
No, it doesn't hinge on it, but the fact of the matter is that, well, I don't want to say fact of the matter because I just say, for all I know, there is no paper on it, and I think that there's good reason as to why there is no paper on it.
I mean, that could be the case. I mean, the thing is that, like you said, Craig offers other arguments outside of this inductive argument, and he might even acknowledge that his inductive argument is the weakest that he has, or something like that. You know?
Oh, he certainly does. I mean, that's why he presents it in terms of order. He presents it as the third, typically, because Craig has a tendency to use similar arguments and he'll frame it in slightly different context. But
Yeah,
typically, he mentions three key points, and the first one is what John mentioned. The second one is this sort of like chaos idea of why isn't anything and everything coming into being out of nothing, and then the third one is he goes to this inductive inference, and yeah, he definitely sees it as the weakest point to make. I don't know if he said that explicitly, but I think it's very clear by his presentation.
yeah, and I think that there could be a cogency objection to that inductive inference on the basis that you are making some kind of part to whole inference there, even if you're not explicitly saying that that's what you're doing, right?
I have a
Yeah, I
question
guess you
for
need
Shelley.
to. I guess what just one last comment. I guess what you would need to do, Sully, is you would need to explain what the distinction is between this particular inductive inference that Craig is making, which you or someone may be skeptical of um, when it comes to some type of fallacy, which you were just mentioning, versus other examples of inductive inferences. You need to
Yeah, I
show
mean,
what the relevant distinction is.
yeah, I mean, I could do it for this case exactly. So the cogent inference that you could make would be to say that all the temporally finite parts of the universe that I have experience with have a cause. Therefore, it's likely that every temporally finite part of the universe has a cause, and that would be a cogent inference. The problem is that if you jump from that to saying that the whole universe has a cause, you'd be making the composition fallacy.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
have a
but that's
question
because
about.
you keep framing it as parts. But anyway, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Right. So my question is, when I think of certain things like gravity or uniformitarianism, what exactly is examined, right? We're looking at parts here, the examples of this, reacting to matter in a gravitational way, or uniformitarianism. We're looking at this layer of rocks, maybe, or just something out in space, or the speed of light, or whatever. And all of these are parts of um, um, gravity or parts of uniformity. And so my question is, if you want to view it that way, what I'm saying is, if you're going to claim that the theory of gravitation, the theory of gravity is a composition fallacy, let's say, right? I think you're undermining the entirety of science, like Jake had mentioned earlier. Wouldn't that be the case if you want to try to view it from part to whole in that manner?
Not exactly. I'll have to say this and then jump off. But the reason why that's not going to follow is because, like I said, if the class of things you're talking about happen to all be parts of the universe, whether you want to say it or not, you can make an inductive inference that's cogent to the other parts. You could say, because every part is X, or because every part I've seen is X, therefore every part is likely X, and that would be a cogent inductive inference. But to say because every part is X that I've seen, therefore it's likely that the whole is X, that's going to violate the fallacy that we're talking about. So,
I mean, the way I look at it is, if you look at if part X, uh, responds according to law Y, right, or law Z, and part, you know, Y responds to Y's law Z or something, and uh, you have that law encompassing all the various parts observed. wouldn't that if you're going to claim some sort of induction in that way as a composition fallacy, I would think that you're claiming that science itself is a composition fallacy. I mean, just that's what it seems to me. I guess you're saying not necessarily.
Well, what I'm saying, yeah, I do. Just really quick to reiterate what I'm saying is that if everything I have experience with is a part, and I have reason to think that they all have a common property, X, then I can make the inductive inference that all the parts have that property, right? But I can't make an inference that the whole does on the basis that the parts have it. And that's not something that science is doing, right? They're not doing that. Scientists don't make that inference in that way.
They do not.
So it's not the case that, for instance, like gravity,
right?
Yeah, I'm still confused what the distinction people are trying to make, because if it's looking at everything, then you're looking at all sets, and you're saying if the universe is a part of that set, then it has a beginning. So I just don't see that there's a problem.
Yeah, you could do that.
It has a cause for the beginning.
Yeah, so let's think of it that way. So there's the set of all physical stuff or whatever, everything. Set of all concrete objects. Okay, so for every concrete object I see, there's some explanation for it. Of course, God is a concrete object, so we might have to modify the set a little bit, but that's fine. Let's just stick with physical. The set of all physical concrete objects. Okay, so every physical thing that I see has some explanation for it, or begins, if it began to exist, there's some explanation for it. So there are some of the members, and then you're inductively going to all the members of that set, which is going to include the universe, because the universe is treated as a member of the set of all material things. So
but that's what Jake was trying to say. So the universe would be a physical thing. It'd be under the subset of that.
Is that what you're trying to say, Jake?
You're breaking up a little bit, Jake. Let's give Jake a second, try to get him to... It's kind of like still a little bit off, Jake.
Okay.
Still trying to hear you.
So if the first premise is saying everything that begins to exist has a cause, and they're including the universe as one of those things, why would we accept the premise? We would just reject it on the basis that we can't say everything that begins has a cause if the universe is part of that set of everything, because we have no reason to think that's true of the universe, or at least we want a justification for it, right?
Yeah,
well,
and Katie, there could be you could be right, Katie. Oh, go ahead, James.
I'll be real quick. You have to explain, though, why you see that everything else observable has a cause, but now you're wanting to, and this is what they kind of call a taxi cab fallacy, because you're arriving at the conclusion everything else, but then when it comes to the universe, you hop off. Now you have to give like a metaphysical explanation why this one thing is devoid of the same cause that we observe from everything else.
Yeah, because we can use induction to determine everything except the universe that begins to exist has a cause.
I mean, that's
but we cannot use induction.
No, I mean, how can you?
No, but
how can you
we don't know how
right?
universe is, because we have no observation. We can't observe a universe. We can observe everything inside a universe, or we can observe enough to make an inductive, choice.
No,
but
that's
we have never observed how universes.
That doesn't matter. Not from the
argument. Universe is part of the class of things.
I understand that.
That's what's being argued for.
I understand that, and I'm now saying
we're not going from. We're saying everything.
Yeah, I understand.
Everything that begins to exist as a cause. We're acquainted with all of these. We're acquainted with all of these different things, right? The universe is a subset within that class. Therefore, there's no difference.
Well, I think there is a difference because we're not acquainted with how universes work. We're not acquainted with anything about universes. So we can't use induction. Or if we can, it's really, as Danny said, it's really poor enough or weak enough to simply reject the premise. I have to try.
No, I'm just agreeing with Danny that it's a much more generalized principle. It's not talking about parts or anything of that nature.
Just think what you said. Because earlier I said I kind of.
So is the argument really like the universe is not a thing under the subclass of things? Is that really the objection?
No,
Yeah, I'm just failing to see there, Danny, why and how anybody can take the universe and apply it to its own special separate category from all observable things, and then say just because we can't observe this means that somehow we should assume that it doesn't follow all other observations of things. That just doesn't make sense. Like, I think it's a bad argument. I think that now you could say in the grand scheme you have to use fallibilistic knowledge on it, but still
Yeah.
being a fallibilist would say that yes, the universe has a cause.
Now, but to play devil's advocate, one might be able to say, well, is not God under the subclass of things?
No, he's not, because it's whatever begins to exist. You're not saying that God began to
Oh,
exist.
okay.
So that's the whole point. It's whatever. It's whatever anything that begins to exist that has a cause, right? So that when the class are things itself. It's not
Okay, so
even
the
what Danny
class is
was
not
saying
just
about
things, but things that begin to
physical.
exist.
Yeah, but that's how it's stated from the
Okay,
beginning.
I
The
got it.
point is, it's not even what Danny was saying about physical or material or this part or no. It's the most general category possible.
Now I see why you can't include God there, because we don't understand God as beginning to exist.
Plus, just to be fair, we don't need to play devil's advocate much on the stage now because Danny's here and Danny knows his position fairly well. So,
And
yeah,
so it's much more modest.
Is somebody arguing that the first premise of the Kalam commits to fallacy of composition?
Yes.
Because I fail to see how it does, personally.
It doesn't.
But I'm willing. Yeah, I don't think it does either, despite the fact that I have objections to it. I wouldn't. The fallacy of composition isn't one. I was just going to say I would be interested in hearing what the whoever was it Danny? Does Danny? I would be if it's him. I would be
No.
interested in
Danny's
hearing.
not.
Oh,
Danny's not arguing that. He's
okay.
just kind of
Sully is
talking
one of
about
them.
it.
I was going to say I would be interested.
I don't even think Sully was necessarily arguing it. I don't know. I mean, maybe he can come back and clarify. But yeah, let me just explain what the genesis of the conversation was. James, maybe you can post a link to the video. It was just something that J Mike had said previously, and he sort of doubled down on it even after the discussion that's mentioned in the video. And it was brought up today by Matt Adams, and I went on stage to say that Matt was right, that J Mike is wrong, and it's not a fallacy of composition. So that's how the context of the discussion. So you would have to watch it, Leo, to see exactly what he said.
I was just going to say, I thought it might have been somebody on the stage that was arguing that it commits that fallacy. I was just going to say I'd be interested then in hearing what the argument, because as I understand.
Yeah. So, Abdurrahman, if you're there, I'd like you to sort of explain the point that I was trying to make, because you were the one who was originally speaking in the video that was sort of up for discussion, and why this is not a part to whole type of reasoning, and what Craig is speaking about with induction.
Yeah, because if it's from part to whole, then what's the whole really? I mean, you need a whole for there to be a part to whole, for there to be reasoning from part to whole. But with an inductive inference, you're just generalizing from particular instances of a thing to all instances of those things. So but there's no whole. There's no part-whole relationship. I mean, it's that simple, really.
What happens if you take the view of just like the singularities being one thing that breaks up into parts? Isn't that whole to parts?
Sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Well, if the universe at some point was, like the infinitely dense concept, if all the parts were just all one thing at one point, like a meteorite, that broke up into all the individual parts, wouldn't there then be a distinction from the whole to parts?
Sorry, are we talking about a specific premise? Is it the Kalam cosmological argument?
Yeah, if somebody holds to
Yeah, we're
P,
talking about the first premise.
yeah, if somebody holds to
So,
P1 with the view that universe isn't some abstract, that the universe is actually pointing to some concrete one that then breaks up into individual parts. What happens if
but
they hold that view?
the first premise doesn't mention the universe, does it? It's just everything that begins to exist has a cause. So maybe you're talking about the second one?
Yeah, if they're talking about the parts, the individual parts.
So every, I mean, the first one is a general statement about everything that has the property begins to exist. I mean, so if it has a beginning, then it has a cause, right? Now, if you accept that, and the universe has a beginning, then the whole thing is irrelevant, because it would just be part of the set of things that have a beginning.
Yeah, so it's
So
talking Abdurrahman. The point is, the class is thing, right? So we're talking about things that begin to exist. We're not talking about universes and parts of universes. That's not how the inference is being made. We're talking about the broad
yeah,
class of
like
things that
you
exist.
could
And
reject the
you're saying
second
that the
premise.
universe is a thing, so if that has a beginning, then it has a cause.
Exactly. So you could reject the second premise and say, well, it doesn't have a beginning. That would be a different story. But the point is, if you accept the first premise, and if you say that the second premise, the universe is a thing, and it has a beginning, and you've already accepted the first, then I just don't see any way around it. I mean,
Yeah, but you're not treating the universe as a part, right?
there's no mention of parts whatsoever in this thing. Like, part of what? Like, it's irrelevant, because you're making a general statement about things that exist. So it doesn't matter what really that thing is. If the premise is true and you accept that everything that begins to exist has a cause, it doesn't really matter what that thing is. Because if you're going to have an exception, then you shouldn't have generalized in the first place, and it's going to be that everything that begins to exist doesn't have a cause, or it's not the case that everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Okay. So if you accept that in
Yeah.
P1 that everything that begins to exist has a cause, that would also include the universe, right?
Yeah, it would include everything, right? Unless you're restricting it some way, which of course there would be a problem with expressing it that way, like in terms of the logic, right? So like the structure of a syllogism or whatever. But if you're restricting it, what you're saying is that, well, there are things that exist and have causes, or there are things that begin to exist that have causes, right? And that's not the same thing as everything that begins to exist has a cause. So yeah, I hope that's clear. If it's everything and the universe is a thing, then it's just gonna have a cause if you accept the first premise. Yeah.
But the stuff that the universe is made up of is also a thing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And that may not have began to exist.
Well, if it didn't begin to exist, then just the argument doesn't really apply to it.
Right.
Yes. So your acceptance, or lack thereof, of the second premise is irrelevant to
Yeah,
what the first premise implies, right?
I don't see how, if you accept P1, why would you then restate it in P2?
You're not
Because if P1 already
restating in
entails a
P2.
universe,
No, in
well,
P1.
you already.
Go ahead.
you're already accepting that everything begins to exist, including the universe, because that's everything. You already agree. If you already agree that everything that begins to exist has a cause, and P2 is therefore the universe had a cause, well, that's already encapsulated in P1.
P2
right?
is the universe began to exist.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. The
So
universe began. Yeah. Well, that's already captured in P1.
not really, because you see, you can accept that everything that begins to exist has a cause, but then somebody might say, well, the universe didn't begin to exist, so
But
it doesn't
I'm confused.
necessarily have a
Well, I'm
cause.
confused, and because I thought P1 is to accept that everything that begins to exist has a cause, which includes the universe.
No, P1 says that if something begins to exist, then it has a cause. It doesn't say that everything in existence begins to exist, right? So everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now, whether or not the universe began to exist maybe remains an open question. So somebody might challenge that and say, well, it didn't begin to exist.
I think there's just confusion as to what you mean by universe, then. Is that what you're saying, Benna?
Yeah. Whatever you
I'm
mean by
trying to
universe.
understand. Yeah, I'm trying to understand what the view of somebody who's been asked this question, if they held to a certain view where the universe is a thing that is one object that gets broken up into many objects, if that makes any difference to this argument, being that P1's an inductive, is supported by induction to say that, well, this is what we observe. I mean, that's what I think William Lane Craig does, right? He uses induction to
No,
say,
not
look at all
only
these
that.
things that begin to exist, therefore we're going to extrapolate that, to P2 that the universe began to exist.
Yeah, that's not
Really?
the only thing he's saying though. But regardless, the point that I think maybe you're missing out on is there was a very specific point that was being addressed, which is whether or not if you support the first premise by induction, if it commits the fallacy of composition. That's the very specific narrow range point that is being made in the discussion. So,
Well, that's what I'm asking. Would it, if you held to the position that if you're trying to say that the parts don't necessarily entail what the whole, not whole does, what's entailed by the whole. So you don't want to say that because the parts have beginning, therefore the whole has a beginning. If you hold to that the singularity or the universe was some dense object that broke up, if you hold to that view and then you use induction to say, well, the parts tell us one thing, therefore we're going to extrapolate from the parts. We're going to generalize to that the whole is the same as the parts.
Yeah,
Wouldn't
but
that
that's
be
a
a
different.
composition
That would be
fallacy?
different. That would be reasoning from part to whole. Now, whether or not it's a fallacy would be a different question. But there, I mean, you'd be right. That would be reasoning from part to whole. So if I said that every part of the universe has a beginning, or every part of the universe has a cause, therefore the universe has a cause, or every part of the universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a beginning, then fine. So that would be reasoning from part to whole, right? It could be fallacious, and it doesn't have to be. Sometimes you can reason from part to whole in a non-fallacious way, but this is not what is being said in the Kalam cosmological argument. What's being said is that everything that begins to exist. It's not. It's not saying that every part of the universe begins to exist.
yeah, that's the key point where it's not part to whole reasoning, even based on the inductive inference.
Okay, so so from P1 where you say, okay, we accept that all the parts have began to exist. P2, so what's the argument from what connects P1 to P2?
What do you mean? I mean, it's just that it follows that see, if P1 is true, and if the universe began to exist, then it does have a cause. So if you accept P1 and you accept that the universe has a beginning, then you accept that the universe has a cause.
How can you, maybe I'm off base, but how can you
count the universe as a part of the set of things that start to exist, if the universe contains all the other things that you're comparing it to, wouldn't it just be the universe as one item? Like it's its own set that has a subset of everything else? So you can't really compare
No.
it to anything because it's
Well,
all by
you
No.
itself.
can just include the universe as an element in a set. The
Yeah,
fact
it's
that
a
the
thing.
universe is itself a collection of other parts doesn't
Right, but
mean
there's
that it
nothing
can't
that
be
exists
used.
outside of it.
That doesn't matter. Like, so in the sense of like some sort of set theoretic outlining of the first premise, like for all x that are an element of set S, x has a cause, where elements in set S begin to exist, which is just to say that anything that begins to exist has a cause for that event's happening. It doesn't matter that the universe is like something that's composite or something that's elementary or anything like that. If we can include it in the set, then that's all that matters.
Even if
Correct.
there's nothing else outside of
Yes,
it?
even if there's nothing else outside of it, it doesn't matter. That's not going to matter to that particular formal structure of the argument.
Well, are you including?
So
Are you saying the
you
universe
can
is a
say
set
there
of
is.
one?
Right, because it has.
So look, Jane,
No, we're
you can
saying the
say there
universe is
is
a
no
thing.
universe. You could say there is no
Well,
universe that began to exist. Okay, and
what?
in that case,
Well, that's not what I'm trying to say.
the,
All I'm trying to say is that the inference that you're trying to make based on, quote, everything, if everything that we are aware of and are getting experience from to make that deduction, that inference, is a composite part of the thing you're trying to determine, it doesn't really.
no, Jane, we're not inferring P2 from P1. See, these two can be like independent, right? In the sense that everything that begins to exist has a cause doesn't mean that the universe began to exist. So these are independent premises, and if both of them are true, it follows that the conclusion the universe began to exist is true. It's not that because everything that begins to exist has a cause, then the universe began to exist.
The argument is essentially saying that if we have again, like if we have a set of objects that begin to exist, and what we define about the set is that objects in the set, objects which begin to exist, have the property of having causes for that, then all the second premise is saying is that the universe happens to be an element in that set, and so it has the property of having a cause for its beginning to exist. That's all that's being said. But yeah, the two premises, I mean, the conclusion is entailed by both of them, but the two premises are ultimately separate premises.
Actually, I'm thinking
Correct.
after Jane's.
His
Yeah,
view
on the view I'm proposing,
about
we're
the
not saying
universe
it's an
is
abstract set. We're saying it's a concrete thing that breaks up into parts.
Well, I was just saying that the first premise is sort of like a universal statement for all things which begin to exist. They have causes for that beginning to exist. And then the second premise is just a statement that the universe is a thing which began to exist. And so that the
I'm saying the
conclusion
universe
infers
isn't a
that
thing.
therefore the universe would be a thing that has a cause for its beginning to
Yeah,
exist.
so what?
Statement that the universe is a thing which began to exist. And so that
Yeah,
the
I'm saying the
conclusion
universe
infers
isn't a
that
thing.
therefore the universe would be a thing that has a cause for its beginning to
Yeah,
exist.
so what if you?
Off you go. I've been listening for quite a few hours now, and I sit in there this morning trying to explain something. Then Jake actually comes in and corrects everybody. Jack actually agrees with Jake. And then you know what I listened to? I listened to Atheists say, oh, well, Matthew just didn't understand the argument. And then Jake sat there and said Matthew was right. You guys were wrong. And not one of you did this, you made this shit up this morning, started lying about me, blatantly lying about me in the room, saying stuff that I didn't even say, claiming that somehow J Mike and I had some sort of argument last night. J Mike and I was in a conversation yesterday, and it was quite a pleasant conversation. There was no argument whatsoever that happened. You just completely gaslit me. Then you were complaining that Cyrus was gaslighting people earlier on. And that's exactly what you did. You kept interrupting me, and I just got tired of it. And I come in here and I hear you guys just making, it's like you were talking over Jake at one point this morning, trying to gang up on him because he was agreeing with me. And then finally, Jack actually agreed with Jake, and all of you just shut up. Isn't it funny that when Jack agrees with Jake, you guys don't say a word to him?
That's because they are losers with no character, Matt.
And I listened to the replays, and I honestly, I shouldn't be this angry, but I got more angry when I listened to the replays today. When I saw all of you guys just zipped your lips when Jack agreed with Jake and said it's not necessarily a composition fallacy. And of course, Jack tried to imply that William Lane Craig had changed his argument. I've been listening to that argument for 20 years. It's the same argument he's been making for 20 years. There's not been any changes to it. So I don't even know what you're talking about there, but still, it's just completely dishonest. And I'm so sick of it. So, I mean, I actually tried to make an attempt to try to listen to what you guys say and try to be honest with you guys. And then that's what I got this morning. Man, it pissed me off. I'm sorry that I'm this mad, but I got to tell you, I can't. And then just hearing this one guy